Thank you all for coming. It's super early. I was actually a little hesitant to come in myself because I had to do the drive-in, but I made it. So we will get started. I'm Leanne. I work on Android at the Periscope team. And today I'm going to talk about engaging user experiences, in particular how we built our Periscope Hearts and Chats. So before I start, I just want to talk a little bit about what Periscope is. Periscope, if you were to ask someone, they would tell you it's probably an interactive live streaming video app, but it's really so much more than just that. It's about discovery and sharing experiences with people from around the world. It's about having conversations and connecting on a human level, being in the same place at the same time with someone. We really feel like it's the closest thing to teleportation. And our designer, I think he said it best when he said, it's about letting the barriers of technology fade away and letting it be about the connections between people. Since our launch last year, our viewers have seen a lot, from watching sunsets to sunrises to hanging out with people they never hung out with before, like Aaron Paul, or watching events unfold in real time, like fire in NYC or the recent one that happened here in SF. And one of the main reasons I think that Periscope has been successful is because of the engaging user experience that we have within the app. So when I first was thinking about this talk and what I would like to present here at Droidcon, I looked at what the word engaging meant just to make sure it was in line with what I thought it meant. And when I Googled this, Merriam-Webster came back and told me that it is an adjective, and it means to be very attractive or pleasing in a way that holds your attention. So then it got me thinking, like, what is it about apps that capture my attention? What is it about an app that makes me want to come back and use the app day in or day out? And what can we do to make an app more delightful, rememberable? And when I started thinking about all these questions, I started thinking about what we do at Periscope. When we're thinking about how to make engaging user experience, it really comes back to one thing, and that thing was something that was just constant, and that is purposeful. Whenever we build something, whether it's an animation or a new UI element or an interaction within the app, we do it because there's a reason for it. There's a purpose behind it. It makes sense within the context that it's being used. We want to make sure that whatever we're building adds to the experience. It should never detract from it. And it should be natural. It shouldn't feel like it's forced or something that we're trying too hard to do. With our heart and chat animations, we really feel like they are purposeful and thoughtful. The way they are used within a broadcast to allow the interaction between a viewer and broadcaster is really magical. It's something that is really unique within Periscope. I haven't seen it in any other apps. And it's subtle enough so that it doesn't detract from what you're watching on the screen, which is really what the broadcaster is sharing. Okay. I just lost my screen here. Okay, we're back. So this here is a test activity that we have within the app to let us play around. Oh, I lost the screen again. So this here is our test activity that we have within the app, which we used heavily when we were first designing the whole heart experience and making sure we wanted to make the animation feel right. And the whole reason why we had hearts in the first place was we wanted to make it really easy and simple for viewers to be able to interact with the broadcaster and to give them feedback about what they were sharing. We wanted viewers to say, hey, I like what you're showing, keep showing us more. I don't know about you or how you feel. Has anybody here ever periscoped before? Great. And has anybody, if they haven't Periscope before, given a talk in front of like a group of people they've never known before? For me, that experience is really intimidating, and it still causes anxiety for me. When I can look out into the audience and see like feedback from people, someone smiling at me or something like that, then I know that the content that I'm sharing is actually being received. And that's very similar with the hearts. When you are broadcasting, you're broadcasting to somebody, like you're just looking into your phone. You don't have any idea how people are responding to that. Now, hearts is an easy way for them to give you feedback. And it's really time-based. It's very easy for anyone to do. They simply tap on the heart, the screen, and then you can send a heart across the way. So making a heart is really easy. We have a custom view, a heart view that takes two assets, a heart border and a heart fill. And you notice the heart border is a little bit bigger than our heart fill. And what we do is we colorize the heart fill. We'll give it a color using a color filter, tinting it. And then we will simply lay over the fill on top of the border. Now, image view provides a lot of methods, provides methods for you to do this out of the box. Like you can specify tint color and the blending mode for it. And then drawable also lets you set the color filter on it, but we don't use any of those because we need it to tint only specifically the fill. So we have 14 colors that are available. When creating a color filter, we will use one of these 14 colors. When a viewer joins a broadcast, they're given a participant index, and that participant index is what we use to get a participant color. It's a very simple modulus operation for us to do that. And then when we set up the color filter, we'll specify the portrait mode and then set the color filter on a paint. So what's that code look like? If you've ever done any custom drawing, you'll most likely seen or worked with the canvas class here. This is what holds all the draw calls for you. When we are drawing this custom heart, the first thing we'll do is we'll draw the border, and we will create a bitmap using the border width and height, and then give that to the canvas so that this is going to be the bitmap that actually backs the canvas. So anytime we make any draw operations, it will be done specifically on this bitmap. And then the actual draw operation using the border bitmap here. Next, we'll set up the color. Again, I mentioned the participant index, and then using participant utility class to give us the actual color that we want to use. And then the portrait mode that we supply here is really just source our top because we want to tint on top of the fill. And then we'll update our paint. The paint is what's going to take care of doing all the actual color for us here. And then lastly, we'll draw the fill. We take the fill bitmap here and the paint, and then give that to the canvas to draw. So creating hearts is really easy, but moving them is a whole nother thing. Moving the hearts is actually what makes the Periscope app feel extra special to me, at least. It's an important part in engaging user experience. And there's a sway to our hearts. They feel magical when they move. They curve in and curve out. Sometimes they feel like they're dancing. And there's a real authentic motion, I would like to think, to our hearts, because when I'm thinking about how to describe the movement and the motion of the hearts, I like to call them fluttery. And fluttery makes me think of butterflies and how they float and fly in the real world. So in preparing for this talk, I was actually rereading some of the material design guidelines, and I came across this quote here. Objects are presented to the user without breaking the continuity of the experience, even as they transform and reorganize. And this quote really made a lot of sense to me, and it's something that we were doing regardless of referencing this actual line here. We wanted to make sure that the broadcaster and the viewers saw the hearts, but they never got in the way of the content. The hearts are really important to the feedback loop, but they are not as important as what the broadcaster is actually sharing. And the way we do that is, again, I'm going to show the animation here. The hearts enter and exit from one side of the screen. They're always drawn on the right side of the screen. And that's to make sure that there's a dedicated space for them to render without getting in the way of the actual content that is being shown. And there's also an energy about them as well. There's some math that we do there based on the number of hearts that are on the screen. You might see that the hearts will flutter more, or they'll move a little faster. There's more energy to them, as opposed to if there's a single heart by itself where it just like takes its time. It's going to make its way slowly up the screen. So how do we do that? So the path to our hearts, we use paths to do all the movements here. If you are, Android like provides a lot of default shapes for you out of the box, like circles and squares. But if you ever want to draw a custom shape, you need to work with a path object. And a path is just basically a collection of lines that you can use and tell it how to draw that shape. You want to describe to it how that shape should look like. We use cubic Bezier curves to do the curved motion. I'm not going to go into what the cubic Bezier curve is. There's a lot of math to it, and there's a great Wikipedia on it that we actually reference heavily when we were doing the implementation. But the idea behind that is if you're trying to get from point A to point B, you want to, and you're trying to draw a curved motion here, you're going to have two control points to describe how that curve should be moving, how fast and how far apart should that curve be. And the last thing to point out with our hearts is there's a lot of randomization involved. When we're talking about motion and wanting it to feel more authentic or natural or not forced at all, you want everything to feel a little more organic, so the randomization helps us with that, and it also makes it that each heart moves on its own. It makes it feel like each heart is its own personal individual. So this is what our heart renderer code looks like. The first thing that we do is we figure out what the weaving randomization looks like, and it's simple as having initial random value that we seed into. This is for our X. And then after that, we compute the length. I mentioned earlier that the length, how long or how far the heart will travel on the screen, is dependent on how many other hearts are on the screen at the same time. And then we have also length multipliers that we throw in there. And then for some extra fun, some more randomization where we also add that, sort of like when you do jitter for your network request when you're retrying stuff. So we do a lot of those things. This here is the path code. There's a lot of parameters in there, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time doing that. And our designer, Tyler, spent a lot of time up front coming up with the math that was involved and necessary for us to draw the curves that you see here. So when we create the path, the first thing we want to do is we set the initial point where we're going to start the movement. And that's the initial X here. And adjusted Y is something we compute depending on whether the keyboard is up or down and what the height of the actual bitmap is. The cubic 2 method here, this is what actually adds the cubic, the curve from the last point. And the parameters that you provide into it, these are the ones that really tell you how far and how fast the curve moves. And we played around with a lot of these numbers. When we were computing this path, it was actually like a labor of love, I can say. There was a lot of adjustments and us looking at what the implementation looked like on iOS. iOS launched before Android did, so for us, we had a reference point for what the animation should feel like. And it was really helpful for us to see what we wanted to achieve and then like how far we need to go to get there. And then it was just a lot of adjustments back and forth with the engineering team and the design team to make sure it felt right. So that's how we compose the path. I'm going to get into some of the animation basics before we actually talk about how we animate the hearts once we got the path there. So animation, Android provides a lot of support out of the box for animations. Their new property animation framework lets you do pretty much anything. This is one of the things that got me really excited about working on Periscope, because I thought I could do all these animations that I never got a chance to do before. Prior to joining the Periscope team, I was working on the Fabric SDK, and we were doing all SDKs, which was great, but that was very little UI and absolutely no animation. And before that, I was working on Twitter for Android, and at that time, we only had view animations, and what you could do with view animations is definitely like really limited compared to what you can do with property animations nowadays. And that was really cool for me to be able to start making use of the new animations. The first thing I want to talk about here is just the duration. So when you're creating an animation, the first thing you want to think about is how long should that animation last? And the default one that comes out of the box, if you don't change it, is 300 milliseconds. And that's a great place to start. But the duration that you're going to use for your animation really depends on what you need your animation to do. So it's a lot about feeling it out as well. For us, the heart animation that you see, we actually use 3 seconds because we want the hearts to travel the entire length of the screen. And 3 seconds was not too fast or too slow for us to complete the animation. The next thing when you are coming up with an animation is to think about how time should be interpolated for you. Like, how should the rate of change be determined? And the timing that you're going to use here is also going to be very dependent on what your animation needs to be. And Android provides a lot of ones out of the box, like an accelerator one, a decelerating interpolator, a linear interpolator. We use pretty much all of those in the app, throughout the app. We also have an overshoot interpolator. So if you've never played around with interpolators, definitely go check that out. There's a whole bunch of really cool things to do. And it's not as hard as you would think because Android provides a lot of things there. The next is animator sets. Animator sets allow you to group animations together, and for us this is important because we need to group a variety of animations because we're animating different types of properties on the hearts. And there's a few other things that you can do from the animation point of view. You can also define whether an animation should repeat or whether it should reverse itself. So, lost the video again. Okay, so we're back. Animator sets, and I was talking about the other properties that you could set on the animations, repeats and reverse. But for us, when we're animating hearts, we animate 4 different types of properties on the actual heart view. We scale them up and scale them down. We also rotate them a little bit. This is what gives them the sway that they have. And then the path, which we talked about how we compose it. And then the alpha, because we want to fade the hearts off the screen as they are exiting. We use an animator set to group all these together. And then we actually use a linear interpolator here. Linear interpolator is a great, very simple interpolator, but it's one that they always recommend you not to use because if you use it, it will feel less authentic or it won't feel as natural because everything's moving in a constant speed and that doesn't model anything in the real world. But for us, that's okay because we did a lot of randomization up front and that allows us to play everything together using the default, using a standard linear interpolator here. So here's what the code looks like for us when we are setting up the animations. This is the heart renderer again. We set up the Bezier curve that we created earlier with the path, and then set the duration of 3 seconds for that. After that, we set up the rotation here, and the rotation is also randomized, so not all hearts are rotated, which is also fun. This makes it so that they will appear completely unique and individual. They have a mind of their own. And then we'll set up the alpha here at the end and fade off the hearts. Then we play them all together by putting them in a single animator set. And this is what it looks like. One other thing that I want to mention about our hearts, in addition to the cool way that they move on the screen, we also have custom hearts. And custom hearts are something that add an extra element of surprise to the app and a little extra magic. And the way that custom hearts work is if you're a broadcaster and you start a broadcast with a hashtag with a special keyword in it, your broadcast may be configured for custom hearts. We had a variety of custom hearts. We had one for Halloween, for the World Series, for the New Year's. We also have an Easter egg one. If you never use that, you should broadcast and see what that one's about. But they're a really easy way to mix things up within your app. And the way we do custom heart support is all the hearts and all the assets are provided to us by the service. So when the client makes a request to get information about a broadcast, the service will say, hey, this one is configured for custom hearts. And then the client will know how to download those custom hearts from the service and then actually draw them the same way we drew the hearts earlier. And then that's what you get on the screen. So this one here is a screenshot of our bats, which we had during our Halloween. So I mentioned a big part of the Periscope experience was the conversations that people have on the platform. And this has been one of the exciting things for me to see. This is part of the community growth that we have also seen as well. Conversations are a way for viewers to interact with the broadcaster. They give them a way to have a dialogue with the broadcaster. You can ask the broadcaster a question, or you can get the broadcaster to do something. I've been in broadcasts where the broadcasters say, which one should I do? And then the audience will say, you should do this. It's sort of like improv, where you have audience participation, which really makes it cool and excited. And I've also been in broadcasts where viewers will be busy chatting with each other and having their own dialogue and completely ignoring the broadcaster. So that's actually pretty cool to see. So this here is an example of what Periscope looks like if you've never seen it before, with some of our chats that happen. This is a video that I took very shortly after the Paris attack that happened last year. And this person here was moving his piano into a public place so he could play a beautiful song for everyone to enjoy, and he was broadcasting it at the same time, and people were joining in and sharing their sympathy with everybody who was dealing with the attacks. And that was really cool to see conversations and Periscope being used as a way to connect people after an incident like that. So this is another screenshot here of what chats look like. There's lots of different kind of chat messages that we support. We have local chat messages that we use to provide information or prompt the user. These are actually never sent across the wire. We also have join messages, like when someone joins your broadcast, or a share message when someone shares something. And the standard comments that you'll see that allow people to actually have the dialogue. And the thing to note here is not all the messages that we show are treated equally. We will actually drop some messages and not bother showing them depending on what type of message it is. For example, joins. If after a certain period of time we've already shown like 20 joins, where there's no point in showing like 20 more, because we don't want the broadcast to be like overwhelmed with just join messages, because that's not helpful or useful for anybody watching the broadcast. And then we'll also do some things with messages like collapse them together. Joins is another example. If you have like multiple joins back to back, instead of showing like 5 joins on the screen, we will actually merge them into one single item and then just update that one single item with everybody's name on it. So here's a closer look at what a chat message looks like. We include the user avatar, the participant color, the chat text. The participant color is really important here. We try to make sure we tie that into the participant heart so that a user will know where they are at in the broadcast. When you click on it, you can actually interact with the chat message. We bring up this screen here where you can either view the profile. If it's a live broadcast, you can reply to the user, or you can also block them if they're saying something that's inappropriate. So rendering chats is pretty straightforward. We use a recycler view with a linear layout manager and a somewhat custom item animator. It's not super custom. It extends the default item animator, but we made some small adjustments to it to change how it translates items. So this is what it looks like when we are configuring the linear layout manager that we're going to use. We set the can scroll vertically to false because we don't want the users to be able to scroll the chats. We want them to, we want to manage all that for them. We want to manage how the chats move on and off the screen so that the user can just be focused on watching the broadcast and enjoying that with the broadcaster and the other viewers. And then the other thing we do here is we set stack from end to true so that when we are adding items to the adapter there, the recycler view will, the linear layout will position them at the bottom. When we are configuring the recycler view, we just give it the layout manager that we created. We also tell it it has a fixed size. This is something you'll want to do if you know in advance that adapter changes won't affect the size of your recycler view. Android can do some optimizations for you, so it's good to set this if you're not already doing that. And then we set it our item animator, which is a custom one. So to show a message on the screen, we basically tell the message container view to add this message. And adding that message puts it into our adapter queue. And then we explicitly tell the recycler view to scroll to the last position. This is what allows us to make the chat messages move one position up on the screen here. The queuing method that we have here, it's really simple. We basically look at the message type, and the first thing we want to do is we want to see if this message is something that we should merge. Is this a mergeable item? If it's a mergeable item, then we'll go ahead and merge it. Otherwise, we'll just treat it as a brand new message that should be rendered by itself on the screen. When determining whether something's mergeable, we're just looking at the message type. We're looking to see if it's the same as the last message type that was seen, and also what is the fade status. If a join message is almost fading off of the screen, we don't want to merge this item onto it. We're going to allow it to continue fading off the screen, and then we'll just create a brand new item here. And it will start off fully opaque. If instead we are, this is what the merge item looks like, the merge item code. What we do is we basically get the last item, remove it from the list, and we want to create a new message item that represents that item, makes it look almost like that, but it's slightly different in the sense that it has the same message item ID, but the message contents are different. And this is what allows us to use the notify item change call here to tell the adapter and the observers there, we only made a data change to this item. There wasn't actually a structural change at all. So what needs to happen is when we rebind this, we're just rebinding the data. We don't have to worry about making any other adjustments. And then if it's not a merge item, this is what the code looks like for the add item. We're simply creating a new message item and adding it to the list of items. I should mention that the message item here is really just a POJO. It keeps track of the message and a message ID, which is what we use. It's a basic monotonically increasing ID. We use that so that we can have stable IDs within the adapter. And after we add the item, we notify that an item was inserted. We're using a lot of the granular data set change methods just so that we can really control what is happening with the recycler view, and we don't want to waste and do unnecessary operations on the screen if we don't have to. This is what our on-bind view holder code looks like. It's simply grabbing the item and then binding it. For the case of a merge operation, if an item is, like if a join is actually being merged with another join, what we do there is we'll set the background color to a different one. It'll be dark gray. If an item is not merged and this bind item is finding a brand new item, then we'll simply do the join with the participant color index so that you can see that. And then the last thing we do as part of the bind view holder operation is we'll set up the fade animation. So animating chats. Recycle view, we use the item animator to do all the basic animations when items are added or removed or moved within the recycler view. But we want to have alpha animations running on our chats. And the reason why is there's a set number of fully opaque items that we want to be allowed on the screen because we don't want the chat messages to completely block and cover the content that the broadcaster is sharing. So there's always this notion of remaining time and remaining alpha. So as a chat item message moves along the recycler view, that remaining time and remaining alpha is always being adjusted. So the way we do that is we have our recycler view that internally has a custom fade choreographer that does all this work for us. This is what the setup fade animation looks like. The first thing that we do is we tell our choreographer to remove any existing fade that is associated with this view holder. We're not going to be using it anymore. We're going to actually create a brand new one. And when we remove this, this is actually where we clear out the fade animation and make sure we can cancel it successfully. Then we'll go ahead and update the item views alpha, that current alpha, with the item's remaining alpha. This item, the message item, is always keeping track of that state right there. And then we'll go ahead and create the fader and then update the choreographer. Whenever we're updating the choreographer with a new fader, what he does is he basically goes and checks to see what are all the faders that are currently alive right now and how many of them are being close to eviction. If there's, for the ones that are close to eviction, we basically ignore them. But the ones that are still running animations, we're going to go through them and see how we need to adjust the duration for them. Because we want to continue this nice flow where the items animate off screen at the time that you anticipate them to. So you would never see an item further up on the screen that is more fully opaque than an item below the screen. Anything that is shown above the screen will always be more translucent than items on the bottom. And this is part of the job of the fade choreographer, to keep track of all that stuff to make sure that chat messages are running the fade animation that we expect. And then this is what the fader does when we are creating a brand new one. It's setting up a simple value animator using the message items remaining alpha and remaining time to set up the duration. And then the interpolator, we use a decelerate because we want it to slowly start out quickly and then slowly fade out here. And then the animation update listener here is what we use to update our message item state as the animations are running so that we can keep track of what the alpha is and what the remaining time is. And then that's pretty much it for my talk. But I wanted to mention a few things, I guess. We really feel like we've built an engaging user experience within the Periscope app that we can build on top of and continue making better. It's something that when I talk to people, they always say that it's something they remembered. And that's really what you want to do when you're building an experience within your app. Make it so that it's compelling so that people want to come back and use it. And there's no formula. Like, I can't say how you do it. I can show you one implementation that we did here at Periscope, but it was something that required a lot of time and thought in it. It's something we're constantly working on. And it'll take a lot of different iterations. And there's times where we've actually tried animations that just didn't work and we had to throw them away. And the key thing, though, like for us, when it comes to deciding whether something feels right, is whether it feels thoughtful and purposeful. And you don't want to put something in your app just because it looks cool, or, well, sometimes maybe you do, but it's got to have a reason for it. And I think as long as you come from that place, like where you're trying to make something that serves a purpose and have a sincere notion behind it, then you'll be on your way to building great, engaging user experiences. So that's it. Thank you.